So today we're going to break down a very specific theological argument about gender, intuition, and the spirit. This is a distinct viewpoint taken directly from our source material, and our goal here is simply to lay it all out for you exactly as it's presented.
Right off the bat, the source makes this really bold, provocative claim. This single idea is pretty much the foundation for the entire argument, so let's dive in and see exactly how they build their case from this point.
Now, it's really important to get how the source is framing this. It's not presented as an attack or anything like that. Instead, it's positioned as an attempt to give what it calls a spiritually accurate breakdown, by, in its words, just laying out the structure of how God designed things.
So what's the foundation for a claim like that? Well, the source material grounds its entire argument in one of the most famous stories out there, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This is presented as the primary evidence. Okay, so the argument here really hangs on the timeline. The source points out that God gave the command directly to Adam, right? But Eve? She got it secondhand, from Adam. And this detail, they argue, is the key. It's why the serpent went after her, because she was seen as more persuadable, having an indirect connection to the command. And from that interpretation of the story, the source pulls a pretty major conclusion, which you see right here. It sets up this core idea. Men are given discernment and women are given influence. These roles are framed as two totally separate, foundational things.
And to really hammer this point home, the source kind of runs a thought experiment. It says, hey, if women were actually the ones gifted with superior spiritual intuition, the whole story of the fall would have been completely different. Eve, they claim, would have seen right through the serpent's lies. The fact that she didn't is presented as proof that her gifts must be something else entirely.
So that's the scriptural basis. From there, the argument starts to define these two abilities, discernment and feeling, a lot more clearly. It really focuses on what discernment is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't.
According to the source, women have this amazing set of gifts. You're talking emotional intuition, deep empathy, being able to read the atmosphere of a room. The source is careful to call these beautiful gifts. But, and this is the crucial part, it makes it very clear that these gifts are not spiritual discernment.
On the other hand, you have men who are supposedly wired for a totally different job. It's all about protection and judgment. You know, the ability to detect danger, sense when something's spiritually off, and judge someone's character. All of this, the source says, is part of male spiritual discernment.
And yeah, this slide really boils it all down. For women, it's about emotional intuition, which equals something feels off. But for men, spiritual discernment is presented as a statement of fact. Something is off. And not just emotionally, but spiritually, logically, even with an eye to the future.
So the argument actually takes it one step further. It suggests that when women use the word intuition, they might be misidentifying where that feeling is coming from. The source claims those feelings are often coming from a completely different place.
And here's what the source says is actually going on. It posits that what often gets labeled female intuition isn't a spiritual gift at all. Instead, it's a manifestation of fear, insecurity, past trauma, or just projecting your own emotions onto a situation.
Wow, yeah. This comparison makes the distinction crystal clear. On one side, you have the source's list for what it claims women's intuition often is, basically anxiety and old wounds. But on the other side, a man's feeling is framed as true discernment, a form of divine guidance, a spiritual warning. The contrast they're drawing is pretty stark.
So how does all of this theological framework play out in the real world? Well, the final section of the argument applies these ideas directly to the family structure, specifically to the roles of a mother and a father.
The source uses a pretty classic example to make its point, the whole tradition of a father giving his approval for his daughter's marriage. This practice, it argues, isn't just an old custom. It's a direct, practical application of male spiritual discernment.
So in this situation, a mother would use her gifts to evaluate a potential partner. She's looking at things like comfort, financial stability, and social compatibility, assessing how this person will fit into the life of the family and the community.
But the father's role is totally different. He's supposed to use his discernment. He looks past the social fit to assess the man's core intention, his spiritual alignment, and any potential danger signs. In this view, he's acting as the family's spiritual gatekeeper.
And the whole point here is that these two roles are presented as two sides of the same coin. They're a single, unified system. They are not interchangeable. They're designed to work together to provide complete guidance and protection for the family.
And to wrap it all up, the entire argument gets boiled down into this one final, powerful concluding statement, which the source itself labels a truth bomb.
Building on that idea of feeling intuition for women and spirit intuition for men, the source lays out what it sees as a clear hierarchy of consequences. When you combine these distinct gifts, you get balance. If you separate them, you get chaos. And if you dare to reverse them, well, according to this argument, that leads to spiritual disaster.
So there you have it, a complete breakdown of a theological argument that assigns very specific spiritual gifts and roles based on